Welcome, everyone, to the AI Risk Reward Podcast. I'm your host, Alec Crawford, and our amazing guest today is Jesse Hamel, founder of Victus Technologies. Welcome, Jesse.
Thanks, Alex. Awesome to be here. Looking forward to chatting with you. I appreciate you having me on.
Great to have you here. So tell us about joining the military.
Yeah, it's this was I had a little bit of history with this. My grandfather was in World War II, a little bit at the end, but I don't really come from really a storied military family like many of my colleagues do. So for me, my story on this kind of started. I was a junior undergrad in corporate finance one at a small kind of Christian school. Came from a small town in Upper Peninsula, Michigan. And I was envisioning, heading to probably New York City to investment banking or, something cool in finance. And 9/11 happened while I was in class. So I just, distinctly kind of remember this, like we all do that lived through, 9/11. So that kind of changed my trajectory. By about that Christmas time of 2001 is when I was like, I really felt called to serve. Like I just felt that it was important to do. So, it took a little bit to get all the paperwork and kind of find where to go and, talked a lot with the Marines for a bit, but the Air Force kind of had this cool slot. I thought the idea of flying was awesome. I was able to get one. So I started into the Air Force right after I graduated in 2003. Thought it would just be for a few years, and then 20 years goes by like that. And all of a sudden, 20-year active duty career and, made it all the way through it. So, definitely a life-changing thing for sure. And my career is kind of a shot of espresso, but that's how I got started anyhow.
Wow, that's amazing. And tell us a story. Like what could you give us these 800 hours of combat duty in a gunship? You got to have some good stories.
Yeah. So, I found my way to AC-130 gunships. There's a bunch of flight training at first, and then that first kind of like 10, 12 years of my career was, combat back. These were the Operation Enduring Freedom days. So you had for AC-130 gunships, you had 2 squadrons. That's it. So it's there's not a lot of them in the Air Force, unlike your F-22s or F-15s and other kind of strike aircraft. Limited capacity. So you had one squadron that basically just went to Afghanistan, and the other one went to Iraq, and you kept going back and forth. And the aircraft actually never left. So we would leave the aircraft over there because there's only so many of them, and you just rotate the people in and out constantly, back and forth. So that was really the first like 10, 12 years of my career. Most of that was, those were supporting U.S. Special Operations missions, as well as you'd have all kinds of folks. We had all kinds of NATO forces, all kinds of different strike missions kind of throughout. And this was from Al Qaeda to Taliban to other kind of different terrorist networks, and then even kind of stability operations in there, where the very kind of tip of the spear and the kinetic capability that a AC-130 could bring was there. So it was also kind of interesting as well as we had. These are early days, but we had pretty advanced unmanned systems. So you had drones flying kind of next to you pretty routinely, rotary wing flying next to you. It was not uncommon to have, you'd call it the stack. So you'd have like 10 different aircraft sometimes in a stack from 10,000 to 30,000 feet and staggered kind of with these little blocks of altitude all above a target area. This target area would be some kind of high value target or something, often like somebody who had been facilitating IED attacks on civilians, or somebody who had been attacking different fire bases throughout Afghanistan, or worse, some of them who had been plotting external attacks on the U.S. and in Europe. And so our mission kind of like we would find these folks, and then we'd have this very elaborate task force of ground personnel. Different special operations mission folks on the ground, different teams that way. And then you'd have this stack of aircraft above them, all kind of doing different things. So some would have a job doing, something in the signals environment. One might have very large weapons. Some would have kind of more responsive air-based gunnery type weapons like A-10s and AC-130s, A being the attack. And then we would stack up, and it was not uncommon to have, you'd be flying, and then you might have, you'd have an AC-130 at a certain altitude. You might have a F-16 from NATO or something in one spot of the altitude. And then above that, you might have an unmanned drone, Predator or Reaper or some other drone. So, pretty complex kind of operations that it was very, it really showed a lot of different kind of aspects of how you can integrate, but also kind of got me, it was something that I got very interested in the ability to use kind of technology and mix manned and unmanned systems. That ended up being kind of a really rewarding thing.
Yeah, that's going to be critical going forward. And you mentioned to me General Mark Schwartz had a big impact on you. So tell me about that.
Yeah, actually, that's I'm glad you brought him up. So that after the first kind of 10, 12 years of combat, pretty normal like for an Air Force career, they went and sent me to get another master's. And so I got one. I did a program called Blue Horizons, which is a cool program, still around. I actually think it's one of the Air Force's best programs. And for a year, I got to really work with different labs. I worked at Air Force Research Labs and Sandia and a few other ones, and worked on software-defined manufacturing, published a thesis on that, really got to kind of understand that and think, very futuristic with this and really do some cutting-edge stuff. Then went and lived over in Germany. This was my one kind of non-flying tour, and did a bunch of sensitive kind of stuff with all kinds of different forces with different U.S. and coalition kind of forces out in Germany, and that's where I worked. That's where I worked for Mark Schwartz. He was one of my bosses there. So he was a 2-star Green Beret then. He retired as a 3-star. I was the only Air Force type, there. So I would wear the flight suit just to annoy the Navy SEALs because they weren't allowed to wear that. But I could. So, it'd be small, like friendly things in there. But I really loved it. Like I loved working with him. And he kind of, he showed me some pretty interesting things just about leadership that I think that have stuck with me. One of the things that he gave kind of a goal of saying we need to really build something fast to kind of affect a new, very new landscape. This was in Germany during 2015 to 2018. So this is after the first annex of Crimea, and Europe was kind of thinking things differently. Like they were actually being forced to wake up to threats they just not experienced before. Like it was different, and really had to start thinking about things a lot differently. So it's a very disruptive kind of time in a ways, and it's obviously gotten more disruptive over the years. But it's kind of started then, and so he gave me the task of building up this task group that we did from 0 to 1, and really it went from 0 to like 110 people with a pretty significant budget, doing pretty significant things. Within about 10 months, I built that up and led the whole thing, and it was a very rewarding experience. No small part of that was because of kind of the leadership guidance that it gave me and mentorship for that, and then also just just showed like if you have the right kind of motivation, the right kind of team involved, like what you can actually accomplish, which is something that's stuck with me. And as fast forward to when I retired. So when you retire, you go through all these different programs to help military, career military warfighter transition to the private sector. All kinds of different programs. All of them are good. Some are better than others. One of the things they teach you to do, which I think is actually a great practice, they teach you these 500 cups of coffee. So you go around, you basically have 500 cups of coffee with people from all kinds of industries. It could be like, you, Alec, with your background. It could be, other folks from like consulting, from finance, from automotive industries, just all kinds of things, just to kind of learn. And you end up learning like a ton. You really build this kind of, sight picture. One of the other things that they have you do, which I think is actually really powerful for anyone, like it's just transitioning from the military into the private sector kind of forces you to do this. It forces you to kind of reinvent yourself, to challenge your assumptions, to see, hey, what things have I learned that I need to bring with me to the future, and then what things may have served me well in the past, but it's time to let them go. I actually think that's a very healthy thing for everyone to do, particularly founders. And one of the things that you reflected on is the military career is kind of a very it's a very unique thing, and they a couple of the mentors would encourage you to reflect on what in your military experience really kind of made you feel alive, like gave you that kind of creativity parts of it. Because like any career, there was things I loved, there was things I put up with, and there was things I absolutely hated about all of it. And that's probably true for anybody in any career, right? And one of the things I came back to, even as an aviator, what I came back to is that one year period where I worked with Mark, and we stood up that like really interesting kind of targeting group, and I was able to do what really was the military version of a 0 to 1. Like actually, like it was the closest thing to a founder. You probably call it a plank holder as a kind of a term you'll hear some people say, but it was really starting something new instead of just inheriting an organization, which is often the military experience. And that's actually true for most of us, right? Most people inherit a position. And that was really meaningful to me. That actually kind of ended up informing my transition about like, this is an area of, as I look kind of towards the future, this is an area where I want to like have more of that. I want more of that feeling, more of that. There's an energy and a kind of a human experience that is 0 to 1. It's not for everybody, but for those that is, 0 to 1 feels kind of like a calling. And that was kind of a really powerful thing for me.
Amazing. Yeah, you've mentioned 0 to 1 a couple of times. It's obviously a pretty famous book by a pretty famous person. Do you
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
pitch that book to the audience?
Yeah, it is. It is. I would, I think it probably gets overlooked because it's so popular. I think there's probably a lot of folks that would look at it and be like, "It's airport reading. Like that's about all it is." And I'm not saying everything's perfect in any book for sure, but Peter Thiel, he gets it. That was definitely inspirational for me. That a lot of what is in that 0 to 1 about how to construct a business, how to disrupt something horizontally and vertically, what is actually valuable in a business, and what it takes to go from nothing to something is definitely a very different skill than it takes to go from 1 to 100, or like a typical corporate skill, which is probably 100,000 to 110,000. And it's not nothing wrong with that. There's nothing. It's just different. It's a different skill. That giving birth in those very early days is a very different skill. So that book also like. Did all kinds of reading, right? But that one always sticks with me is like, this is this well articulated kind of that different. I don't know if it's a gene or a skill set, maybe it's just a personality trait. Maybe it's all three. But it kind of articulated that's a real thing, and there's some professional and personal growth that a person can only experience doing 0 to 1 stuff as well, which was really interesting to me. And that book kind of talks about that.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, before we talk more about Victus Technologies, you mentioned that you saved Oliver North's life. So I think we got to learn about that first.
Okay, yeah, fair. Yeah, it was. I usually say that line if you're like, you're too young for that, right? Like, so usually I hear something like this. I was like, well, it wasn't it wasn't in the 80s. It was not in the 80s. There was this is kind of one kind of combat situation, but it described a lot of what AC-130 gunship combat was like, which is like other, I think, extreme kind of jobs that are kind of characterized by they say long periods of boredom and then one very short period of sheer intense terror almost. And that's definitely the life of a AC-130 gunship aviator. So there was a mission where we had called, and it was an alert launch style mission. We went and responded to something pretty fast. The term that is often used is troops in contact, or a TIC, a TIC. And there was operation centers that would be kind of located throughout a theater. And you'd put an actual siren, like a siren light. And when the tick went off, the lights kind of in this operation center goes down, the light goes on, and then people kind of man certain stations because you have U.S. or allied troops somewhere are receiving effective fire from an enemy force. That was kind of the definition of that. Well, that happened frequently. And we would actually have, this was the days where there were still some pagers. So we would have pagers that would go around and page us when it was time to alert launch. So something like this kind of happened, and there've been some changes in the mission, but this kind of mission taken off, went over to support this Marine contingent, and they got completely ambushed. So there was no exaggeration, about 30 people that rolled out of a house onto a rooftop, RPGs and heavy machine gun fire for pretty small U.S. Marine contingent, that is talking to us on the radio. This is definitely a mortal combat situation, and we put down very effective kind of defensive fires, save the lives of everybody within that Marine unit. Nobody took any casualties that I was aware of, what they said then or even later. And one of those really powerful ones that sticks with you, where you were thanked for saving somebody's life as you left. And it was kind of one of the cool parts about doing the job that I did. What we came to find out later is that Fox News had Oliver North and other media correspondents were embedded on that unit. They were there. And there was some news clips later of him kind of talking about how an AC-130 gunship had shot and effectively saved all our lives. So it was kind of it was an interesting situation. Those were there's many other stories that are kind of like that, which was just the kind of mortal combat life that you live when you're in combat. Sometimes they have happy endings, sometimes they don't always have happy endings. But in this case, it was a cool one where you're able to save somebody, and it's a great like trivia card. Like what did I not know about you? So it works well for that.
Yeah, no one would guess it for sure. So tell us about the origin story for Victus Technologies.
Yeah, as I retired, so I commanded a drone squadron. And we had, small ones, Group 1, Group 2 drones. Group 1s are like fit in the size of your hand. Group 2, probably your like standard quadcopter size. And we had commercial off-the-shelf ones, as well as like some very high-end kind of military ones that are quite expensive. One of them about $300,000 a piece for one of these Group 1s, very small ones. And I remember this is at the end of my career, I remember being struck by how great the hardware engineering was and how bad the software was. I won't dime out the company here, but like it was obvious that they had really effective hardware, and the software just was decades behind where it needed to be. Not only was it not autonomous or intelligent, it was just bad UX even. Like it was just bad. And I actually saw this in other kind of DoD programs as well, this kind of same thing. So I retired and didn't want to sit on my hands too much. So I retired on 1 September 23 and started at a grad degree program at MIT 3 weeks later. And the intent of doing that was to kind of, I had a hypothesis on autonomous systems and to kind of test it within the MIT ecosystem. You can see both on the tech side and the market side, try out a couple, experiment a bit and kind of get an idea like, do we have something here that really would matter? So we did, MIT has several of these, and the Boston ecosystem does. We did a pitch competition, did well at that, got number 2 out of 68, and it was enough. I was like, all right, I'm gonna power down my personal consulting practice, which I had been doing for a bunch of different companies and a big defense prime, and just go all in. So we papered the company, teamed up with my secret weapon brother, who's a career software engineer, an AI engineer from Microsoft. He's a striper and a few other kind of YC types on the West Coast. And that was like, okay, we can solve several problems that are not yet being addressed. That was kind of the key. And one of the ones we saw, which I had seen at other parts of my career, was just this reliance on GPS. So the idea of like, can we develop an autonomous software solution to solve that, really became compelling with a lot of our user base as well. Because what we realized is that in the span of a couple of years, we COVID ended, we pulled out of Afghanistan. We focused a lot on the Russian Federation, which is a very different enemy than the Taliban living in caves in Afghanistan. And then we're also all very much aware of the threat of the Chinese Communist Party and what they bring to bear in all kinds of areas. Very different enemy, and that kind of like potential contested environment includes a denial of GPS pretty easily, like from all different kind of domains. So something that we had planned on always having and designed all kinds of weapons, all kinds of drones, all kinds of manned aircraft, all kinds of maritime systems, low Earth orbit systems, subsurface systems, all of it, all kind of depending on GPS, much like we thought the internet would just be fine in the early 90s. We didn't need encryption. It was kind of like this. As like, this is no longer the case now. It's just not the case. So what we also found is like most attempts to solve this were some like very expensive, unique kind of like hardware solution. You could use atomic clocks to try and redo the timing that you get from geosync. You could do magnometers to go off magnetic lines of the Earth. You could do quantum inertial measurement units. There's a few folks looking at this. You can put another constellation up in low Earth orbit and have laser comms to the top of a drone or top of an aircraft, all of which have some technical validity. They also all, in the drone world, for example, they also all make every drone go from $2,000 to about $50,000. And it's just not really sustainable, even in government, and definitely not in commercial verticals. So we kind of really indexed on what we ended up filing a provisional patent for and built a company around that we then in the fall of 24 participated in Techstars and MIT Sandbox as a couple of accelerators, and are really now just kind of coming into our early go-to-market. And our fundraiser right now is, can I take a software solution? Can I use agenic goal setting that we've proven in other domains, very different applications? Can I build a digital twin for that agent and then replicate that drone in that simulator, do machine learning at 1 million times real-time speed? Unlike how most robotics training is being done right now, most robotic training is being done in real time, which takes forever. The key to machine learning is accelerating the X. Can I build that kind of simulator environment, use agenic goal setting that gets the human involved with what the goal for that autonomous agent is, and then build that on something lightweight and open and modular, which I think is the really key for anything autonomy and AI, by the way. Built it to work on a Raspberry Pi, work on a Jetson, built a Mavlink, built a robotic operating system 2 standards, all those kind of like standing 4286, like the basic standards that we have within the drones and robotic industries. And we see drones as just flying robots. And then put that software product on any software platform / hardware platform. And then as if something happens with the GPS, it gets jammed, or worse, it gets spoofed, which is something we're actually seeing pretty frequently. Even in the US, this is starting to happen. Within civilian aviation, we're starting to see this. If something happens to the GPS estimated state that Kalman filter on that IMU is detecting, and it no longer has accurate nav, then I can switch over to our navigation solution, and it navigates in the simulator to these kind of like simulated pixels that we've trained it on, and then operates autonomously, in that environment with very, very high error correction, and then all the way through endgame. So that can happen through cold start, it can happen through en route, it can happen through terminal guidance phase. The key thing I think on that is that from an autonomy perspective, that's actually one. It makes the sensors that are already on drones and robotics much more valuable, because you're getting 100x more value out of them this way because you have intelligent software, and then it also brings in the human involved in that simulation training, which is really, I think, an interesting thing for like the future of AI and autonomy as well. Because when the human and the machines are involved with that goal setting early on, agenic style goal setting, it lowers your bar for what explainability needs to be. You're much more comfortable with a type of black box if you were involved in the goal setting. Just like most individuals would not be able to explain exactly how the cruise control in their car works, but because they set the goals for it and they see the results of it, that's a type of autonomy. And they're comfortable using it. The end user is actually comfortable with that, and it's become part of our kind of society. So we see this approach is really what unlocks what we believe is the coming kind of robotics age. We believe from 2025 to 2035 is the decade of robotics. It's going to impact all areas of national security and probably every area of human activity. The key to doing this is not to add more sensors and more exquisite hardware as we ask these robotic systems to do more sensitive things for us. The way to do it is to train them in a simulated environment that mirrors what they're going to do in real world, have the human involved with that goal setting, and then use their senses, just like you and I, we have 5 senses, use these 5 senses for a complex kind of interplay between a type of prefrontal cortex and visual sensor that we've basically built in a simulator. And it allows that humanoid, allows that drone, allows that orbit-based platform, it allows that maritime-based platform to be much more valuable and much more reliable. And then it drives the cost and explainability way down.
Amazing. So what's interesting is, MIT just announced that in the lab, at least, they've created insect-sized drones with 100 times the range and battery life of before, which I thought was fascinating. And along the line was what you're doing and that. How do you see the role of AI evolving in national security and military operations?
Yeah, I mean, it's a super important point. You know, there are, you know, we talk a lot for good reason about AI and autonomy, but there's actually equally as impressive generational leaps being made in battery tech, size, weight, and power, speed of manufacturing, different types of propulsion, hydrogen propulsion, different, solar-based ones. They're actually really compelling. Both of those get more compelling as they start to merge. AI gets much more interesting, even than it is now, when it's no longer just a chatbot on your phone or computer, but it actually is powering intelligent robots. Then the use case is just to the nth degree expand in this case. That is happening in combat. So combat combat is a contest between two intelligent entities, and they will use all available means. So as technology goes, that's why often the military is at the vanguard of some kind of technology, often because of that reason, like because of the forces behind it. Not always, but often. So those two things I think are going to push us to a world where we're going to measure air forces and maritime forces in hundreds of thousands of autonomous agents that are teamed with kind of very specially placed human agents that are setting goals for these large swarms. I think these swarms are both air and sea and orbit and surface and subsurface. And I think there's coordination that will happen, multi-domain coordination. And that will also blur the lines between what's a weapon versus what's a drone versus what's a platform versus what's a bullet. This is all going to evolve, and it is already happening. It's already happening, and that's powered by the commoditization of token rates. I mean, the token rates of the cost of a token rate is falling like by 100x because because how fast this kind of is happening on the AI side. As we we're seeing like strong indicators early of this, but as we kind of rebuild a new industrial base within the U.S. and kind of Western partners, which I think is kind of we're at the embryonic stage of this happening, that new industrial capacity will also be highly automated and will be capable of levels of production that are just never been seen before. It's not going to look like General Motors from the 50s coming back. It's going to look different, and it's going to be capable of very high volume. So this idea of like very, very high volume with very intelligent agents, I think, is absolutely the future of warfare. And I also think it's the future of many commercial verticals. From hospitals are going to deliver human organs this way. We are going, our disaster response will be this way. There's, drone as delivery service is definitely happening right now. You got many towns that are experimenting with this. You're going to see this all throughout agriculture. Agriculture might become completely automated, both from automated tractors, automated drones. Construction is going to, and is starting to see this. They're early in this, but they're starting to see massive changes in how you think about using drones and autonomous systems to build our structures and even design them. And this interplay between intelligent systems that we can design a simulated world for, we can then practice something and even see what the intelligence is going to produce in 100x real-time speed, and then go do it in the real-time speed in the real world, having a confidence of what its outcomes are going to be. That's going to be a real kind of key for unlocking a lot of what we're talking about.
Amazing. Yeah, I've heard about what people call dark factories, where it's all robots in there. You don't need lights because there's no people in there, right?
Right.
They're just making robots that are going to make more robots. Yeah, that's going to be super, super interesting. And let's talk about some of the downside. Look, AI is going to do amazing things. I think DeepSeek is a good example of something coming out of the out of the woodwork, and it basically fails every let's protect humans test, right? It will write You know, it will write code that will let you hack people. It will, answer your questions about building a nuclear weapon. It's literally failing all the governance tests. Um, so let's talk about the downside of AI going rogue or other problems. Like, what are your thoughts there? What should we be doing?
Yeah. No, AI is, I'm not the first to say this. I definitely agree with this analogy. AI is best thought of as leverage. It's the ultimate leverage. So it will leverage good or malign things, whatever you leverage with it. So think of this: DeepSeek. I 100% see DeepSeek as a form of warfare. That was 100% a form of warfare. I think there's clearly IP theft that happened for it. It definitely did not cost $5 million. So there's obviously accounting type fraud. I think that's it's being advertised as, and then what it was trained on. I think there's some pretty obvious examples of this. It also will not answer certain questions about the CCP as well. That is part of the dark side too. So because what's also happening is these intelligent agents are going to train us. So they're programming us too. So this is the TikTok effect, right? But it's happening with DeepSeek, it's happening with GPT, it's happening with your feed on X, it's happening with all of it. You're programming yourself. All kinds of research shows that humans are not nearly as rational as we like to think we are, and we're actually programmed a lot by just what we see and what we kind of put into our ears and our eyes. So choosing what algorithm you decide to program yourself with is actually going to be that's actually existential part of freedom. That cannot be let. No one else can choose that for you, and I think we have to really fight that. So that's I think a real danger if we get to the point where we can no longer choose the algorithms that are training us, because that is happening. So, and I think DeepSeek's kind of an answer of the example of this. And that's definitely a downside to where we're going. There's also this is uncharted territory for humanity. Obviously, like the putting where the human is involved with this, what decisions are best for human, what decisions are best for a machine agent. I think it's very nuanced and has to be approached carefully. You get that wrong. Do we want to live in a world where our laws are written by bots? There's valid arguments for this. There's concerning things about this too. Do we live in a world where lethal decisions in combat are made solely by bots? That I think is another interesting one. Depends a bit on your goals. And that also then, you think about, if you extrapolate that out a bit, and folks talk about this, but like, what does the future of work look like? What does work even mean? What does IP ownership even mean? There is not a single patent right now, not a single patent, and there will never be another one that didn't have some AI involved in the developing of that patent. Not a single one. The patent lawyers now use AI themselves to try and determine which folks in the patent office are more likely to approve a certain type of patent, and they write it towards that. Like, that's all. It's actually bot on bot already. This is definitely happening in the public trading market as well. This is happening in job interviews, right, where the ATS systems are monitored and crafted by bots, and then humans are using bots to apply to these ATS systems, en masse. It's happening in sales. It's happening in marketing. So I think I think it's undetermined. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of peril. We could definitely get this wrong. And so I think that's probably the risk. And the danger is because of how powerful the leverage is. This is the ultimate leverage. It just amplifies, so it amplifies that malign tendency or altruistic as well.
Yeah. Hey, shifting to our advice section, do you have any advice for potential founders coming out of the military? What resources did you find helpful?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for asking that. Particularly for vet founders, I would say this. One, I think veterans have some unique advantages for entrepreneurship. One of the highest being is that you've probably done things that are hard, and you've probably done things that things did not go well, and you had to rebound from it. I think one of the key parts of being a founder is just the grit to just kind of keep going. So, there many like veterans will talk about this. Having a kind of imposter syndrome where you transition from the military and you put yourself into a private sector and your resume doesn't really line up very well. You didn't spend a couple years at McKinsey and you didn't go to maybe this particular group and you didn't do this, X, Y, and Z like your other Fortune 100 folks have. So you feel like, oh, I'm behind. And I would say you're not. You're not. If anything, you have kind of this unique advantage. So lean into that. That's one thing I would say for founders. The other one, because we could talk all day about resources. They're out there. I found people across the U.S. and internationally even to be really like wanting to kind of help and at least give thoughtful opinions and really help veterans on this. So I found that actually was like really encouraging for me. So I would encourage any like entrepreneurs, whether founding or not, whether thinking about it, is just start talking to people about it and kind of getting their perspectives, and it will help kind of inform your site picture. And there's people that really do want to help, all kinds of agencies. The flip side of that, this is true for any founder, and it's something important for somebody coming out of the military, which is still a government job at the end of the day, that no one's coming to save you. No one's coming to save you. So you're not going to fall into some kind of entrepreneurship, option. Like manna doesn't just fall from heaven on this. You have to work, take advantage of the network you have, build it, learn the skills. In my case, it was like, hey, let's go get another degree. Let's, talk to all kinds of people. Let's work through the PMR. Let's work through the full process like any founder does. And again, no one's coming to save you on this. So you have to find kind of within yourself the desire for self-immolation to where you will destroy all your own excuses. So burn your own excuses down, slay your own demons if you have them, and you probably do. So slay them and become something you were not, but then use kind of the experiences and the things you were taught on how to deal with something when it gets hard, when things like really get hard. Use that as your own tailwind. It's a very dangerous man or woman, and I mean this in a positive way, that can affect be a founder and move out when they're willing to just stand alone when it's hard. So when you have that skill, and you keep working and you keep iterating, you keep taking the feedback, you keep welcoming the hard feedback, you perform like no kidding feedback on yourself, on your own aspects of it, and you really like continually learn, make yourself better. I actually think there's a ton of opportunity. This is the greatest country in the world. This is there's all kinds of entrepreneurial activities out here that can be done. 2025, and I think even going forward here, this is a fantastic time to be looking at starting something and then really building and kind of choosing your own adventure, and that ability to really unlock your creativity. That's when you work 100 hours a week, which is, I'm at probably the 80 to 100 hours a week. There's 7 days in my week, not 5, and but doing that, if it's something you're passionate about, and it has to be passionate about, something you have an unfair advantage for, and you can weather the ups and downs that obviously come with this world, and they're extreme, the ups and downs. But you have kind of a reservoir to draw from them. That's a pretty cool thing. So I would say to them, like, look at it, and if there's something there that you're really passionate about, and you have an unfair advantage to bring something to the market, really create some value, go for it.
Yeah. Or you can come work with Jesse or with me. Right? We've got
Yeah.
we've got a senior engineer, as a retired military guy. So we're gonna shift gears to our final segment, which is underrated or overrated. So I'm gonna mention some things, and you tell me if you think they're underrated or overrated, or maybe fairly rated, or maybe you have no idea.
Okay.
And we're gonna kick it off with a local Florida Panhandle cocktail called the Bushwhacker. Underrated or overrated?
Yeah, definitely overrated. Definitely overrated. Yeah, not. Yeah,
Definitely
it
overrated.
sounds cool though. Sounds cool. It's a cool name, right?
It's like
It's a cool
like
name.
a pina colada with chocolate or something. Yeah. The
Yeah,
future of
yeah.
directed energy weapons. Underrated or overrated?
Man, that's a great one. Yeah, that's a great one. Like, I would break that into if I broke directed energy. I'm fighting your question a bit here, but if I broke directed energy into high power microwaves versus high energy lasers, I would be bearish on high energy lasers, but bullish on high power microwaves. So if I can, I'll choose an it depends on what part of
Yeah, it
directed energy.
depends.
That's where I would go on that one.
That's our answer. That's our answer right there.
Yep.
Kite surfing as a hobby, underrated or overrated?
I think underrated. I mean, I've done very very little of it myself. I need to actually pick up more of it, but that's cool. Like anytime you're doing something like where you can literally feel wind with your hands, whether you're flying an airplane or doing kite, like that's cool. That's underrated. Yeah.
Starting your career in the military, underrated or overrated?
I think it's probably underrated. I mean, it depends on what it depends on all kinds of reasons why, but you know, getting the kind of experience on leadership, the kind of budget, the kind of like sense of purpose and duty and service that comes with that early on, and then some tangential benefits that kind of come with it as well. Doing that early, I think that's underrated. I think it's actually it's a very good move for a lot of people.
Tom Clancy's book, Clear and Present Danger.
Yeah,
Underrated
I'd
or
probably have to
overrated?
say, it's a good one. I'd probably have to say overrated on that one. It was, I don't even, I know I read it at one point and I don't remember it very well, so I'd say overrated.
Hey, it involved gunships, so I figured I'd throw it in there.
Fair enough. Yeah,
Key
yeah.
lime pie, underrated or overrated?
Oh, that's underrated. I love key lime pie. My wife hates it.
Uh,
And so I have a hard to, this is a contentious issue in my house, but I like it. Yeah, exactly. I love it.
you gotta have that when you're going out to dinner. Then I guess
Exactly. Yeah.
insect sized insect sized drones, underrated or overrated?
They were overrated. There's been some unique battery kind of, I think, innovations. You mentioned one of them. I think they're now underrated. I think their time is now. We are right at the precipice of this. So I think they're underrated.
Yeah, yeah. Beachcombing as a hobby, underrated or overrated?
I barely know what that is, so I'm going to say underrated. It must not be that great.
It's just like picking up stuff on that floats up on the beach, basically.
All right.
Uh,
Overrated.
the military risk of deep fakes, underrated or overrated?
The military risk of deep fakes. That is a good one. That's probably underrated. Deep fakes ultimately go to poisoned training data. That's what deep fake is. Poisoned training data. Poisoned training data, is that a real problem for military operations? Yes. Yes.
Right.
Particularly as we try to, you know,
Yeah. Or we've seen recent
yeah,
examples. So there's a company in Hong Kong where someone impersonated the CEO using a
right.
deep fake on a
Yeah.
video call and convinced someone to wire more than $20 million somewhere,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah. No, I
what if
agree
you
with that. I
think the
think
president's calling you, telling you to do something? Who knows, right?
exactly. No,
Yeah.
I think
I
it
mean,
is. It's a real. I think
I
it's a
think,
real thing.
yeah, real thing. Yeah. And then last but not least, the movie Apocalypse Now, underrated or overrated?
Well, I mean, it's kind of classic. Like it's hard, you know.
You could say
Probably,
fairly rated.
yeah. I'll say underrated. I'll say underrated. That is a good one.
Yeah.
It does like it does kind of get into some like core elements, especially like the going native part. Like, I'm like this is a real phenomenon. So,
Mm,
yeah, I think it's underrated.
yeah. Yeah. But I mean, the director's cut is super, super long, but worth watching at least once.
I agree.
So,
Yeah, I agree. It is super. You're right, though. It is super long. Yeah.
anyway, this has been Jesse Hamel, founder of Victus Technologies. Jesse, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Alex. This was awesome. Really, really enjoyed this. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks. All right.